Good evening. Hi, and welcome to the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. And this is Series 1 and Episode 2. And this is entitled Students Setting Up. And I'm really pleased that you've come to join us this evening. And I hope you're going to find it useful in understanding what's happening at the moment in the maternity services with our students and our educationalists. And I'm delighted I have two colleagues with me. One is Dr. Anna Byrom, who's a senior lecturer at UCLan. Hi, Anna.
Hello.
And the second person is Alicia Burnett, who's a student with us also at, and also co-editor of the Student Midwife Journal.
Yes.
So we have multi-talented speakers with us this evening. And I'd like to I'm about to share the screen and okay, so this is us. And this is the Midwifery Hour, Maternity and Midwifery Hour. And this has been developed to provide information for students, student midwives, and everyone supporting women, babies and families at the moment. And this hour and the podcast, which will also be available on iTunes, Spotify, and all good podcast players, is supported by Netflix video streaming. And that's from the maternity experts, and these are all your CPD needs made easy. If you need to get your revalidation done or have a student project to complete, Netflix is the one-stop shop for you. Before we start, I'd just like to really pay a tribute, firstly, to all the people working so hard in many parts of the health service, of course, especially the maternity services, to the students, midwives, to the healthcare support workers, the admin staff, all the housekeeping staff. You're doing a fantastic job, and it's a really hard time, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. And I'd also like to think about the people we've lost in the health service. There seems to be some confusion about the number of people we've lost, but there is a very good site, and that's in a list in the resources at the end of the session, where we know 54 people who work within the health service in many different areas have lost their lives to COVID-19. And I think it's important to acknowledge that and give thought to those people and their families and their loved ones and their colleagues. It's a very sad time for them and for us to think about. Just to mention our tweet tag, as for those tweeters out there, we are #Midwifery Hour, and our Twitter account is @Midwifery Forum, for those of you who want to do that. I'm just going to throw this out really. We know that COVID-19, this coronavirus, is a pandemic, and I think it's important to really always remember it's something out of the ordinary. It feels out of the ordinary. It's made a difference to all of our lives. It's making a difference to people with health issues having to be shielded. It's making a difference to most of the general public who've been required to stay on lockdown initially for 3 weeks, but it looks like a lot longer. And the idea of staying at home with the 4 exceptions, the exercise, the food, the work, and the medical appointments. In the health service, we know that many people have died, as well as the many people who aren't in the health service who are in the population have died, and also who are very sick at the moment. And obviously we're thinking about them, their loved ones and their families as well. We know some people are in self-isolation because of themselves or of their family having infection, or they're shielding them. We know there's been huge anxieties about personal protective equipment, which seems to be easing in some places. There seems to be little areas where there are problems, and testing, which is also increasing. We know the Nightingale units are now in place and being used in quite a small way at the moment, and hopefully it might stay that way. And the major thing for us within this hour to think about is staff well-being, the concept of stress and anxiety, the thing that many health members are having to work longer hours, and they're having changing patterns of work. They might be working in different areas, and they have to struggle with the PPE, and that in itself can be very difficult, especially as the weather's got warmer. You're wearing all these materials for a lot longer than normal things very hot and quite claustrophobic. And within maternity, we know that there are midwives who have sickness and other staff who are poorly. We know that there are limiting visitors, so that generally, mostly, it's women attend on their own for care, apart from when they're in labour. And I know there's a memo on that from the RCOG and RCM. There have been midwifery-led units that have been closed, but it's from today on Twitter, I noticed there were at least two that reopened, which is fantastic. Much better place for the mothers to go for their babies anyway. And a home birth has also had a little bit of a dip, I think, but that's also seems to be improving. But of course, there is the anxiety and worry for women, families and babies, just as there is anxiety and worry for midwives and student midwives at the moment. But of course, unlike elective surgery and some of the services within the health service, maternity services can't be delayed or cancelled. Antenatal care still needs to be provided. Postnatal care is still really crucial. And babies do continue to be born. So it's going on. So I'm going to really get my two colleagues, one after the other, to share the focus on students, midwives, and education. Now, before I started, I wanted to say we have Alicia Burnett, who's leading students. She's plugged in to student networks, and she's a third-year student midwife at the University of West London and co-editor of the Student Midwife Journal. She's also the creator of the COVID-19 Cohort, which is a new blog, and it's a safe space for student midwives to share their experience of being a student during the novel coronavirus pandemic. And you'll find that blog on the All For Maternity website. We also have Anna Byrom, who I'll introduce in a moment. I just wanted to ask Alicia if she had a moment of the week. This is slightly unusual. Just wondered if you had a little moment of the week, Alicia.
I've spent this week in particular speaking to a lot of student midwives from all over the world, and they've been sharing their experiences of how COVID-19 has affected their midwifery practice, as well as what they're being taught via remote learning. And it's really just opened my eyes. We really aren't alone in this. It's happening to everyone all over the world, and midwifery students all over the world are having similar and also quite different experiences. So that's been my moment of the week.
Fabulous. Okay. How about Anna? Anna Byrom, do you have a moment of the week also?
Yes, definitely. Obviously, we've been having a little bit of time to be with family, those close family members that we're in lockdown with, and having time with the children, stolen moments against the tide of work has been wonderful. But my sort of highlight for this particular week has been I've been having weekly calls with a group of students that I support, and we had a lovely conversation together. And through the difficulties that the students have faced, making difficult decisions for themselves and their families, we were able to laugh together and share some of that burden. And it was actually such a lovely moment.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Anna. We're going to hear more about that later, I think. Thank you. So I won't take any more time from Alicia. And I'd like to welcome Alicia for her perspective on the student experience of stepping up in the face of COVID. So the time is yours, Alicia.
Okay. As Sue has nicely introduced me, my name is Alicia Burnett and I'm a third-year student midwife, and I'm absolutely delighted to be speaking with you all today. And I'm very eager to share with you my presentation. Okay. So how was life for our student midwives before COVID-19? We were going to university, we were sitting our theory blocks, and we were also going into clinical practice. These are a few of my colleagues here. I've got lovely Laura, Lika, Surya, and Ali. But what does life look like for our student midwives now? There have been a lot of changes. The landscape of midwifery education in the UK and across the world has changed drastically. So the first change there has been is that universities have closed their sites. So we are all undertaking remote learning. Here in the UK, we've also been given the option to opt in or to opt out of clinical practice. And for each year group, that looks very, very different. So first years have been removed from clinical practice entirely. So they're doing 100% theory. For second years and for third years in the first 6 months of their degree, first 6 months of their third year, pardon me, they've been offered the option of an 80 to 20 split between theory and practice. With that comes the option of being paid for their services to the NHS. But for third years, in the final 6 months of their third year, things look a little bit different again. So they'll be doing 100% of clinical practice in an extended clinical placement, and they'll be getting paid at a band 4. And will no longer be supernumerary. I've left the reference there at the bottom for you to have a look at. This is what I'm really interested in. I'm interested in how students are feeling at this time. And there are a mix of emotions. Some are positive, some are negative, but all are completely normal. I want to place some emphasis on acknowledging our feelings at this time. And here's a summary of some of the feedback I've received from students. So some students are excited about going onto the front line, as we're calling it now. But there's also a mix of anxiety and fear. There's fear around contracting COVID-19, particularly in view of the fact that there isn't always a good supply of PPE. But this is something I'd really like to focus on, guilt. I myself, I'm having to opt out of going into clinical practice at this time because I'm shielding one of my family members, and I feel a great amount of guilt around this. And I know that is also the case for many of the students that I have spoken to. I want to send out this message to you that you're still a valued member of the healthcare team in this country. I'm getting a bit emotional. You are still a valued member. Whether you opt in or opt out, we are all student midwives. You're all in this together. There's also been a bit of confusion because the information we're receiving changes every day. There's a very rapid pace of information being sent to our universities and from the practice areas. And there's also a degree of sadness. We are, in a way, we're mourning the loss of the degree that we thought we were going to have. The pathway that we were currently on has now changed very, very drastically. We're worried about whether or not we're going to graduate on time. There's a lot of mixed emotions. So I want to focus on some strategies to maybe cope with these emotions that we're having at this time. Okay, a number of concerns. Firstly, there are financial concerns that have been reported by students. Am I going to get my student loan? Will I still be paid my student bursary? I would advise you to have a look at the Student Finance England website and also at the NHS bursary website. They have reported that you will still receive your student loan and you will still be in receipt of your NHS bursary. If you have further concerns regarding your financial status, I would advise you to go and seek help and advice from your student union. There are also concerns around our academic lives at the moment. And the best source of support that I could recommend to you are your university lecturers, as well as your student union. You may have the option of getting an extension, and there is also the option of applying for mitigating circumstances. Safety is another huge concern, especially regarding PPE. Just yesterday, the NMC released some guidance about PPE in clinical practice, which applies to nurses, midwives, nursing associates, and also the students of all three of those professions. So I would advise you to have a look at that. You can also ask to be referred to occupational health, your lecturers, and you can also seek support from your practice area. Childcare is another huge concern. I want to let you know that the government has mandated that we now have key worker status as healthcare students. So your children are eligible to go into daycare and to school. Mental health, we are all undergoing a huge international trauma. So mental health is a concern for many of us. I would advise you to speak to your loved ones at home, your friends, members of your cohort, and also the Student Union Wellbeing Team and your lecturers. Excuse me, I'm a bit nervous. This is a list of reputable sources of information for student midwives at this time. There's a lot of misinformation out there, but you can look at all of these resources here and be guaranteed that they are from reputable sources. And this is the NMC, the RCM, the Council of Deans of Health, Health Education England. These are the people that are working together so hard to make sure that this is as less of a trauma to us as possible, okay? So this is where you should be getting your information from. This is what I highly recommend. Okay, this is my little pet project. Since I've had to opt out, I've been sitting at home and thinking, this is happening all over the world to all of us, but we don't know how each of us is dealing with this situation. So I thought up a way to bring all of the student midwives in the world together. And I've come up with this blog, the COVID-19 cohorts. So I've been sourcing accounts from student midwives from all over the world. I've spoken to students in Rwanda, Jamaica, Iran, Saudi Arabia. I'm going to speak to students in Norway, Turkey, Bulgaria, the USA. So that's my little project. And this is where you can find it. It's based on the All for Maternity website. So the website is www.allformaternity.com. Open access, so it's free for everybody to access. This is where you'll find it. And this is the first published blog. It's by a first-year student from the UK, so you can read her account of how she's feeling at this time. I really want to hear from you. We can all learn from each other, and we can all generate a global network of student midwives. You have a voice. I'm trying to provide you with a platform for you to share it. Your voice is important. We need to raise the profile of the hard work that we are doing during this pandemic. And this is my way of contributing to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Can you just clarify the that website, which looks absolutely fabulous, absolutely fabulous, and just the sort of thing that you can sort of tune in and get lots of information. Is it an open area that anyone can go into, or is there a degree of confidentiality? Are there ground rules as you go in?
So the website is www.allformaternity.com. And when you get in contact with me, I will send you a list. I will send you a brief, and within that brief, it contains details such as you have to maintain the confidentiality of your practice area. I will also afford you a degree of anonymity so that you are not able to be identified through what you're writing. It's just very important that everyone that submits to the blog maintains the confidentiality as set out by their regulator of midwifery in their countries.
Yeah.
This is a safe space for you to open up and share your experiences. I want you to be protected, and these are the safeguards that I've put in place to make sure that happens. We're a really, really approachable team. We just want you to get your voice out there because you're working so hard and you deserve recognition for it.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Alicia, because I think people can get anxious about what they're allowed to put in these sort of sites. So I think that's really helpful. And have you had very much kind of feedback from student midwives who've been previously nurses and are being asked to go back into nursing? Because that's an area I'm quite interested in, because if in a way, if you're working as a student midwife, you're getting all the experience you're adding to your portfolio for when you qualify. And I would imagine that a student midwife who's being asked to go somewhere else might worry that, I'll never get all my deliveries, or I'll never get my antenatal care. I don't know if you've had anyone contacted you about that.
That's an area of interest to me also. I have heard from a few student midwives that are on the shortened course. Yeah. So they've already got their registration as a nurse. Some of them feel immense guilt about continuing their role as a student midwife when they know that they have skills and knowledge that could be applied as a nurse at this time. So there is quite a bit of guilt surrounding that.
I've also been working with students like you, Alicia, working alongside students on the shortened programme who are contributing alongside their studies, especially those that are doing their theoretical components. So working with the support of the lecturing team, ensuring their safety, of course, and ensuring they're able to maintain their studies, but also are contributing their own time to in the weekends or in the evenings to contribute, especially those with skills in critical care.
Yeah.
And I just think it's an opportunity to say thank you to those amazingly brave and also, you know, like Alicia said about, you know, it's difficult if you're unable to because of your family circumstances to, you know, you may be feeling even more guilty, but also to say thank you to those people that feel they can contribute in those ways.
Because I think it's important. Everyone's contributing in a very different way. And it's interesting that Alicia, I think in this whole discussion we've picked up, and Alicia's picked up this whole guilt area, which seems to be, you know, it's bad enough feeling guilty, anxious and worried about working without the sort of burden of the guilt that you're not doing the right thing or you should be doing this, that and the other. So that's been really, really helpful and interesting, Alicia. But we'll come to you a little bit later with some more questions because I'm having questions fed from the audience even as we speak. But before we get on to question time, with thanks again to Alicia, I'm going to now move on to the lovely Anna Byrom, who's Dr. Anna Byrom. She is a senior lecturer at University of Central Lancashire, UCLan for other people, and she's the director of Your For Maternity and Practicing Midwife. And in her spare time, what does she do? She's a busy mum as well. And she's going to give us her perspective on what it's like from the teacher end in supporting the students, and also, I guess, what it's like for the teachers in their idea of in their coming into practice. So the floor is yours again, Anna. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and thank you to you, Alicia, for all of your insight and support. It's really lovely to be here and to be sharing together in this space. I feel really lucky to be able to communicate and learn from each other. So thank you so much. So just as we've heard from Alicia and from Sue at the beginning of our time together, we are facing these unprecedented and challenging times together. And collectively, we're facing a new range of challenges and burdens, both professionally and personally, and I feel we've really reflected those. And I think it's important to echo Sue's gratitude at the beginning of the presentation tonight. And I also want to send my personal thanks and gratitude to everybody that's working so hard and facing so much in all areas of life, really. So not only in the healthcare services, but all of those key workers and critical workers that are sustaining us and ensuring that we have access to food and that we're able to continue, and all of those teachers supporting our children. So I really wanted to start with a huge amount of gratitude. I wanted to echo kind of what Alicia had alluded to. I think one of our biggest challenges in this time has been actually, like we face all the time, is an information overload. We're living in an information age. It can be really challenging to navigate and look through, sift through masses of information, and yet we're expected to do this really rapidly in our work. And I would say as an educator, that's something that I felt really under pressure to do, is to respond and listen and look out for new updates daily sometimes, and sometimes even within the same day, new information is emerging. And I think for all of us working in healthcare, that's one of our biggest challenges at the moment, is remaining up to date and informed. And equally, the challenge is that evidence is growing as we learn more about this novel virus. And so we've got lots of researchers that are working really hard, lots of amazing lead midwives working around the country. I know there's groups of professors of midwifery coming together to look at the evidence and help and support our Royal College and the NMC, Public Health England and Health Education England are all working really, really hard to navigate this information together. I think in order for us to do that, as we've heard from Alicia, we've got to be aware of where to source the information we need. And I've put some slides together with a very specific focus on, as educators, where do we need to go to keep up to date? We're lucky as midwifery educators because we have the lead midwives for education, and they are a group of 55 lead midwives for education that are working together as a group to look at all of the guidance and apply it to midwifery, working together in this really cohesive way to disseminate information throughout the approved education institutions, the universities where students are sitting. But equally, they're facing masses of information and variation. One area that I think we should all be looking to during this time is the COVID-19 web hub that the NMC have put together, and I find it such a brilliant resource. It has frequently asked questions that you can look to, and I think that if you're looking for an area to really feel updated as an educator and as a student, I would urge you to go there. And also for our clinical colleagues who were working, supporting learning in practice, again, I would, in the moments you do get a chance to update yourself, especially those that are overseeing student learning, it's really important that you go and have a little look on the NMC website. Also, the Royal College of Midwives has put together some great resources and pulled together lots of information for you on their website. And you just need to put RCM COVID-19 and you can click into these useful resources. And there's a specific area for students and educators that, again, I would urge you to look at. We've been really supported as educators with the Health Education England guidance and frequently asked questions. So for those educators that have not yet read this, I really recommend that you do. It will have come through your university systems and communications, and we can put a link to it at the end of the presentation for you to read, and it has some really helpful answers to help you navigate the recommendations. And for students, the Health Education England have put out a really helpful guide to help you also understand those 3 areas that Alicia alluded to. So the support for students in their first year, and them requiring to work in theory and advance their theoretical knowledge and prepare. And there's information about those people in their second year of studies or their first 6 months of their final year. And there's information and questions and answers for those of you in your final 6 months of your training. And I think it's a really helpful resource to supplement the information coming from your university. So as educators, the challenges that we face are really similar and mirror a lot of what Alicia said the students are facing. And I'm sure mirror the challenges midwives working in clinical practice are facing too. The biggest challenge is digesting all of the updates. I think sometimes there's the assumption that we are told before, just like midwives working in clinical practice, sometimes women and families will feel that midwives would have been informed before them about changes and updates, but we're often receiving news at the same time or sometimes after students are receiving it because we're busy teaching online or working. We've had to amend programmes rapidly to accommodate the new and emerging standards. For example, having to bring theory information forwards for first year students and potentially for second years too. Supporting practice areas with the updates and the information to support our clinical colleagues who have little time to keep up to date with the information. And we've had to start navigating, for many of us, online learning and responding to really big variations out across from one university to the next. Programmes are so different and variable, and yet students talk amongst themselves between universities, and that can create challenges. It can make people feel really anxious, and it makes us feel anxious too if our colleagues in other universities are doing different things to us. Who's doing the right thing, the best thing for students? So like Alicia, I want to think of some ways that we could work together to support one another. And I feel as an educator, my focus is in these three broad areas. I feel responsible, and my focus is in supporting students at the heart of everything that I do in order for them to support women and families safely and effectively. But around that, I'm also working to support practice and practitioners and midwives working in clinical practice. And I feel that we need to really work hard to support one another. I feel that we're in it together. I think we have to share our vulnerability in these difficult times and work really closely together and be really compassionate and understanding, and recognise that we all probably don't have the answers at our fingertips that we'd like to be able to share, or understand the full consequences of all of the recommendations until we're actually trying to implement that in practice. So I wanted to focus on supporting students, and I feel for us educators, our challenge now is to make sure that at the top of our work is offering that extra pastoral support for students, giving opportunities to listen regularly, providing time to meet online, to talk through and let students share their experiences. We've got to be working really hard now at this time as students are making their decisions to opt in or opt out, to prepare placements for the changes that have been brought forward with the emergency standards from the NMC. We've got to review the course requirements with each individual student to support them to know what they're required to do in order to qualify on time to continue safely on their programme of studies. And we need to continue to respond to the mass variation between students, but also around the country and our placement settings that we are attached to. In order to support students, it's really helpful for students to access the e-learning for healthcare modules that you can take, and we are recommending students do update themselves with this, especially in preparation for returning to practice. It's freely accessible to all students, and we'll make sure that links are shared with everybody at the end of the presentation. We also have access, as the creator of All for Maternity, a big area that we focus on supporting is education and supporting your learning, sharing and caring needs. And we have, like Alicia's talked to you about, areas that are freely available to support you. And it's lovely to work alongside Sue and all of the team with Matflix, who have a range of videos and worksheets and resources that you can work through. And I know that a special offer is being made to both of these sites for anybody that would like to take out memberships. So universities can access the Matflix for £500 for the 6 months, and we're doing 6 months free at All for Maternity for anyone that wants to take out an individual membership to offer that support. Obviously, the other area that we're working really hard as educators and clinical educators is to support practice. It's really important to make sure that whilst we're supporting educators and clinical practice, that we mobilise and access our existing networks. It's been so wonderful over the last week. Another key moment for me has been pulling together the national networks that have been developed because of the future midwife standards. We've been coming together as a national group to discuss what the new standards, the emergency standards, mean, and pooling our resources and sharing resources. Obviously, SSSA preparation is a big priority now for midwifery in most midwifery institutions and practice settings. And in order to prepare for this, we need to engage with local practice education facilitators and practice development midwives, and obviously all of those clinical frontline midwives that will be supporting students as they return and continue in practice. And obviously there will be those individual and bespoke variations we need to be mindful of. So preparing for the SSSA for all midwives working clinically that will be supporting student learning in practice, and for all of our education colleagues, there will be some maternity units that's already transitioned to the new SSSA Part 2 standards from the NMC. But there will be many maternity units that haven't yet done this, and many approved institutions, universities that haven't. And they'll be very busy now trying to prepare for this so that we can support students to return to practice safely and effectively with appropriate supervision. So I'm recommending to anybody watching that is an educator, or anybody watching that's a clinical educator, to please read the SSSA standards that are available on the NMC website alongside the emergency standards. This is a really helpful infographic that's been shared by the lovely Lindsay Illman, who had some money from Health Education England to look at the new NMC standards and look at coordinating a national group to look at developing a national framework for student assessment in practice. And she's created this really helpful infographic that just explains the transition from mentorship and sign-off mentorship to supervision and assessment. And that's what many of our clinical colleagues in practice will be encouraged to do with the support of the universities. And obviously for students, they need to be familiar that their universities and practice areas where they're supported with their learning will be transitioning, and they need to be familiar with these new roles. So mentors will become practice supervisors, and that can be anybody with a healthcare registration. Then they will be giving you support and supervision every day or every week, depending on who you work with. And the practice assessors at the end of your placement will do your summative assessments with the support of your academic assessors. So it's really important as students to remember, as midwifery students, you won't be joining a temporary register. You will be continuing to be supported through effective supervision and assessment to complete your university requirements. So there's a little note. There's a little note at the bottom with the list of the new emergency standards requirements for all student midwives to be supervised. We also have to remember as educators and students to support one another by accessing our existing networks, using social media safely in line with our recommended guidelines from our regulators, share good practice and stay in close contact with each other. Obviously, one of the challenges we face as educators is having to move all of our learning online. And so we've provided some resources at All for Maternity with some study sheets that you can share with your students that you might find useful, little videos, articles and some activities to complete. You might also want to join, if you're an educator, the Midwifery Education Facilitators Facebook group. It's a closed group where we can share resources and ideas together. So please come and find us if you're on Facebook. And if you're teaching online, I've just thought of some really top tips to make that as effective as possible. Always check your systems are working and that you have access to headphones and effective equipment, and your university systems should be supporting you with that. You do need more time to prepare your space, and we really recommend, I've found really effective ways of learning is to set students work to do before doing flipped classroom, where the students come back and they can join in on the presentations and share what they found, creating more of a connected conversation during your classroom time. You do need more time to settle everyone into it, and it's worth spending some pastoral moments together to make sure everybody's comfortable. One benefit, though, of teaching online is you can do it in your pyjamas and you can eat and drink to your heart's content and have notes at your side and still look quite professional. It's also important, just my last slide, is to remember that amidst all of these challenges, we have to look after ourselves. And I would say if you're teaching online a lot, one thing that I've learned really rapidly is the importance of leaving breaks in between the teaching that you're doing online and in between the meetings that you're doing online, making sure you take breaks and also check in with your class if you're teaching online to make sure they're taking regular breaks, standing up, moving, being mindful as well, trying to take regular exercise that hour a day that you can go out, make sure you're using that, because it's easy to find yourself huddled up in a bedroom like me. It's important to spend time looking after one another. So thank you so much, and I'll provide some links on how to make online classrooms innovative and creative. I'll share those with Sue so she can share them at the end of the presentation.
Fabulous, Anna. Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was really good, and I think when Anna was talking about the last few issues about looking after yourself, that goes for student midwives and midwife educators and midwives, you might want to look at last time's Midwifery Hour, which had a few tips for people to take up. And I think that was a really good illustration on how we all need to work together and we all need to value each other and our unique part in the maternity services, and in terms of midwifery education, learning together all the art and science that is midwifery, and how even wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you can get something really special out of it. So thank you very much, Anna. Now, I have got the honour of freeing up. You were talking about social media, and my little telephone has been bleeping away with some people tweeting busily about things they want to know. And I've got one question is from someone called Daisy Flumps, and she wants to know, and I don't know who this would go to. Oh, do you know? Oh, it's gone. Hang on. Do you know why some trusts do not want students on placement and others do? Would it be not more beneficial for blanket? I don't know how that one goes on. I'll have to have a look. Hang on. Sorry. Would it not be beneficial for blanket decision, i.e. for safety and making sure we do not lose our learning experience, as it feels as though if we're paid, we'll not be learning with our mentors in the usual way? I think some of that's been answered, but I don't know if Alicia might know if that, from her feedback from students, whether some of the students are feeling a bit unwelcome in trusts. Are you picking that one up?
Unfortunately, that has been one of the themes from the feedback that I've received, particularly from students on the shortened course. They almost feel as if they shouldn't be students at this time. They should be working as nurses, and that has been communicated to them by some of the staff, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I agree. Some of the trusts, by trust, things seem to be a bit different. So there is a bit of bespoke tailoring of the guidance.
Yeah.
Anna?
And I think, yes, I think obviously the challenge can be that we have to make sure that there is a safety of support for students until we receive the emergency standards at the end of March. So before that, prior to that, there had to be an assessment, sometimes by the approved education institution, sometimes by the local trust itself. Can we maintain student safety during this time? And so when some information was unknown, and certainly the recommendations and the information we were receiving from the government and Public Health England at the time was to kind of restrict access and to limit unnecessary entering into healthcare settings, I think that it was certainly sometimes difficult for students, and some of the recommendation was to withdraw students until we knew a little bit more. And some of that related to PPE, lack of PPE equipment, some of it related to not enough mentors in some clinical settings and areas to safely supervise and support students.
Okay, so it may not have just been because they didn't want anybody. It might have been more about keeping the students protected, and sometimes in the best way.
Yeah, I think sometimes as well in those early days when we were quite fearful as we started to realise how serious this was becoming, I think for some of those midwives that are there on shift receiving students that are turning up for shifts, there could have been confusion as well, like Alicia alluded to, whether they should be coming into this environment. So I think now that we're in a position where there is improved PPE, improved testing, and we've more of the training is being accessed by midwives working clinically, I think the return of students to practice will feel different. But I think it's worth that student, Daisy, discussing that with her local lecturers and colleagues if she's got any concerns.
Fabulous. Thank you very much for that one. I've got another question kind of linked from a lady called Laura Henry. How can students not in practice best support those in the clinical areas, like students working as HCAs or interns? And she says, I'm in Ireland, so only students out currently are paid midwifery interns and employed HCAs.
Okay, so
that makes sense?
I mean, some of those intricacies I wouldn't be totally familiar with about how it's been implemented in Ireland, but it would be worth talking to her midwifery team. But I think there's a lot, like Alicia, you said, about support and supporting each other. If there is any reason, for health reasons for yourself or your family, that you may not be able to go into practice, to support, I feel like we have to work together in the community, and we're lucky that we do have such a connected community online. I think one of the ways that we can help our colleagues is to set up small groups of positivity where we can listen and share and hear, and offer some containment to those of our colleagues that are working in clinical practice, because I know I've heard from my friends and clinical colleagues who are seeing women now coming through that are affected by COVID-19, and the challenges and pressures that they're facing, having to, like our nursing colleagues, deal with loss and trauma, and so I feel like we will be really needed, those of us that might not be right on the front line.
Absolutely.
What do you feel, Alicia?
I agree with you completely.
Yeah. Yes, I think there was someone in the news who was a nurse who's died, sadly, and in the maternity services. And you can imagine that those midwives are going to cope with the COVID plus losing a mum. It's very painful, and that's going to require the whole midwifery family to draw around, I think.
And also, you know, because it is so hard to keep up to date with information, maybe what we could do for each other, those of us that are sitting around sort of navigating some of the information, is maybe sharing that in bite-sized, meaningful ways with each other. And so those in your cohort that aren't able to return to practice, or those in first, you could be supporting second and third years that are doing more practice, and having those conversations and debriefing regularly, I think, together.
Fabulous. Well, I've got another question, and I think this one I'm going to aim at Alicia, which is from Chloe Louise, and she says, have you any tips on studying at home? I'm a second year who's opted into the 80-20 and will still have essays, one due on the 1st of May. But I struggle to have energy / motivation when in the house due to too many distractions. I get that. Especially with the sunshine, and if you have a garden. But Alicia, you'll have some tips for that.
Definitely. For the first couple of weeks that I was at home, I went to bed whenever, I got up whenever. I didn't have a routine, and it really, really wore on me. I wasn't productive at all. The first thing to do is try and make sure that you get yourself into routine. Out of bed before 12, get up, have your shower, make your bread, have some breakfast, and do a little bit of your work each day. Allocate a couple of hours each day, and no one can bother you. Turn off your phone, no distractions whatsoever. But also reward yourself. If you had access to an outdoor space, go and sunbathe. It rejuvenates you, energizes you. So a routine, allocate a couple of hours a day, and get some vitamin D.
Excellent.
That's
a little bit of evidence-based stuff there.
Also, I find sort of noisily.com really useful if you're struggling to distract your mind. You can just type it in. You can have it on your phone as well. It's an app called Noisly with an I, NOISLI.com, and you can listen to productive noise and working in short bursts for 45 minutes. And like Alicia says, then going for a break. 45 minutes, then going for a break. So that I find really helpful when I've got a job to do or marking.
We'll need that link on our list of resources, Anna.
Okay.
And that's great. Thank you very much, both of you. That's fabulous. I've got Jennifer Galloway is asking, what do we do if we haven't heard anything from the university or placement about opting in when we have chosen to opt in? Where can we go for advice, or who do we contact for clarity?
Should I help with that one?
I think that's you.
Okay, so what the process is that Health Education England is asking all approved education institutions to send out a survey to student midwives in order for them to complete and choose their options. It's really important that before students get that link to the survey, which is quite basic, it's literally just a tick box, they need to have read the student guide from Health Education England, which is accessible on the website. But I know from our university, I can give as an example, really focused on the nursing students first and got them through the survey first, and then has only just turned to student midwives in the last week. So I'm anticipating that it should be very soon, but I would ask your lead midwife for education or your course leader or academic advisor if they can give you some information on that.
Fantastic. I'm going to move fast because we want to get through a few more. We've got a question from Becky Terry, who says she's obviously waiting to become a student. What preparation would you recommend for those starting uni in September? And is the course structure likely to change due to the current first year's missing placement? Thank you.
Alicia, do you want to say about how maybe you prepared to start universities and some ideas and tips generally, and then I can just finish off with about the course programme?
What I did was I got in touch with, my background is paediatric nursing. I did 18 months of that and thought, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, especially because they were getting rid of the bursary. So what I did was I got in touch with someone that I knew was actually on a course already. I talked through what the expectations were, the standard of like A and P and things like that, and she gave me some really good directions. I would recommend the book that Sue is actually co-editor of. It's really, really helpful. Every student midwife knows that textbook. I would also start reading around contemporary issues in midwifery. For example, continuity of care, read Better Births, acquaint yourself with that, and also the future midwife guidelines, just to give you a feel of what you're letting yourself in for. And welcome, we can't wait to have you.
Yes, and I think just agree with Alicia, and I would say, you know, it's really helpful to look at the Royal College of Midwives and look at the resources available to you there. We've got resources available at All for Maternity, but there's some also fantastic resources available on Facebook. There's Ellie Durant runs the secret community of Midwives in the Making, and that's a fantastic community to ask questions from a pastoral point of view and preparing yourself on like what do I wear on placement and what do I need to buy. I would say that the universities have such a wide range of learning resources that when you arrive, you probably will get access to all of the Elsevier range of books. So it's worth maybe pausing a little bit before starting, but there are some really great freely accessible information that can just give you some starting blocks. In terms of your the curriculum, there may be some subtle amendments depending. At the moment, we're not clear on how long this is going to last. And we also have to remember that first years that have now been moved to 100% theory will have to return to placement. So we'll have to do some careful planning locally with the local maternity units to ensure that we don't have too many students in placement. So there may be some subtle amendments that are needed to be made, but we can't be sure about that just now. But we'll make sure that you're updated.
Okay, thank you very much, because that is very much depends, doesn't it? We've just got one more question. There's lots of questions, but we've only got 1 minute for this next question. Jill Bjork is saying, is there anything additionally we can do in the clinical area to support the student midwives who've opted in as they come back out into practice? That sounds a very practical one.
I think she's my lovely friend. I think so. There's not many Jill Bjorks, I'm sure, in the world.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you. And I know for a fact that Jill works really hard to make sure students are supported. And we're so grateful for all of her hard work. But maybe, Alicia, you might have some points of view from a student perspective of how that might be feel and what would be the priorities for you as a student.
There have been some talk on social media about a wobble room. So a safe space for us to go to if we witness something really upsetting in practice, so we can just pop off for a few moments and just gather ourselves again, because we are being exposed to things that we've never been exposed to before on such a grand scale. So, and just that bit of understanding from our practice supervisors that we're not always going to be at our best. There are things going on for us at home because of everything that's going on. And also I urge students to reciprocate that and know that our practice supervisors, they're going through this too, and just have a bit of mutual understanding for each other. So just like a safe space for us to disappear to for a bit when things get a bit too much.
I think that's fantastic. And I love the way you say reciprocal. I think that's really special. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.
I think we could go on for a lot longer, and I'm so sorry we've run out of time. And there is so much to discuss, but remember, we will be back next week with another item. But you'll be able to follow this discussion on the Maternity and Midwifery Forum website. You'll also be able to follow it on the Practicing Midwife and, of course, the All for Maternity. It'll be there. I'd like to say a special thank you to Matflix for supporting the programme and the streaming maternity experts. And just to reiterate that Matflix have a special offer for students at the moment. Stepping up or qualified midwives answering the call back to duty, they can access their box set of maternity experts for those new to working maternity unit for half price, just $4.99. So it's worth checking out on www.matflix.co.uk/blog for details. And finally, I'd really love to thank very sincerely our fantastic speakers who've really gone through some very practical things and some very working together things, which I hope will help student midwives and midwife educators and midwives in supporting mothers and babies at this sort of time, because we're all, and I know it's Anna's thing, and I think it's Alicia's thing, this all in it together, supporting each other and working as a team, which sounds absolutely fantastic. So thank you to Alicia Burnett. I have to make sure I properly acknowledge, third-year student midwife at the University of West London and co-editor of the Student Midwife Journal. Thank you so much for those very practical tips on how to work at home. I think people will actually identify that really well. We've got used to working differently now, a lot more of this Zoom and Skype, and we're getting better at it, but there are certain things that if you're in the house on your own, it's very easy to slip into bad ways. So you'll keep us grounded on that, Alicia. And of course, thank you very much to Dr. Anna Byrom, Senior Midwifery Lecturer at UCLan and Director at All for Maternity, for you put a lot of material in there, and it was really, really useful in terms of education and in terms of understanding what happens in practice and how we can support students at this sort of time. So thank you very much to the beautiful speakers. Thank you everyone for coming along to watch. Next week, we're going to be looking at supporting pregnant women, new mothers and babies and families. So I hope we can see some of you next time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's lovely to be with you. Thank you, Alicia. Bye.
Thank you both. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
The Maternity and Midwifery Forum brings you Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. All your CPD and revalidation needs met in one place. Our expertly curated box sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, we can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today. Box sets are £17.50 each, or access to them all starts at £6.99 per month. Students pay just £2.99 a month. Check out the box sets and subscribe today at www.matflix.co.uk.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.